Welcome to the Ordinary Doula Podcast with Angie Rozier, hosted by Birth Learning, where we help prepare folks for labor and birth with expertise coming from 20 years of experience in a busy doula practice, helping thousands of people prepare for labor, providing essential knowledge and tools for positive and empowering birth experiences.
Hello and welcome to the Ordinary Doula Podcast. My name is Angie Rozier. I'm your host and I'm so happy to be here with you today. So we are in our little series talking about the stages of labor. Our first little episode talked about the first stage of labor. Second stage is what we're going to focus on during this episode of our podcast. So second stage of labor is pushing. If you hear that terminology in the hospital or wherever you're giving birth and they say second stage, or second stage was 12 minutes, or second stage we're at 3 hours of second stage, realize that they're talking about the pushing phase. So at this point, the cervix has completely dilated. It's gotten out of the way. It's completely thinned. It's completely disappeared. It's completely opened, and it's time for the baby to come through the cervix, for the head to start coming through as the mom works with contractions. So stage 2, we still have great contraction pattern. Sometimes this pattern, which may have been pretty awesome and obvious and intense during the transition phase of stage 1, when we complete dilation, sometimes it dials back a little bit for this second stage of labor as the body is expelling or pushing out the baby. So depending on a lot of things, stage 2 can be a variety of lengths. Sometimes it is 2 minutes. Sometimes it is 2 hours. Both of those are completely normal. One thing I want to say about this, several times in the last couple of months, I've been with a client, a birth client, preparing them for labor, and they've had a baby before. So this is in cases where this is what we call a multip, like they have already given birth to a baby and they're having a second or third baby or whatever. Actually, every one of these cases, it was a second baby. And in each case, both my client and her partner were very concerned about something, and they kind of deemed it as traumatic. But in every single case of this little handful in the last couple of months, they said it was traumatic because they pushed for 2 or 3 hours on their first baby. And they didn't think they should have been allowed to push that long. Something was wrong. And I want people to know that pushing 1, 2, or 3 hours is incredibly normal if it's your first baby. So that second stage of labor, pushing, if it's your first baby, it can be a while. Sometimes it's longer than the dilation process. Usually not, but that second stage can take up some time for sure. If it's your second, third, fourth, 10th, 12th baby, oftentimes it's much shorter. I call that first baby the trailblazer baby. They have kind of made a way, they've paved a way for anybody else coming after them. And it's a little bit smoother and easier the next times. So stage 2, we might be having a very similar contraction pattern as before. These contractions might get a little shorter, they might get a little farther apart. Sometimes the uterus will actually take, if it's not on Pitocin, because Pitocin will override this, but sometimes the body will take a little bit of a break between becoming completely dilated and then starting to expel or push the baby out. Sometimes it will stop contracting for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And we only see that if folks don't have Pitocin going on or an epidural, because you wouldn't notice that if you had an epidural. And if you have Pitocin, the contractions would be overridden by the administration of Pitocin. And a lot of times that is the uterus preparing to do something different. So it kind of actually takes a moment and bunches itself down in preparation to push. Now that it's completed the opening process, it shifts its muscles to do something a little bit different. So for those who are unmedicated and they're approaching second stage, sensation changes. And a lot of times it's a welcome change in sensation. It's a relief to have a change, and you're going to be doing something different. So when we dilate to 10 centimeters, and let's say you're unmedicated, the best course of action is to release or relax all other muscles, which is difficult, especially over a period of time, many hours, and fatigue. But when we get to pushing, we now take a little more of an active role in that. Very traditionally in hospitals, they will encourage and coach people to push 3 times for every contraction. So a contraction's about a minute or so. So you'll push 3 times in that minute. So do the math. You're pushing for, 30 seconds or something. Or maybe not quite. And somebody might be counting to 10 for you. Very common to do counted pushing. For some folks, that gives them something to kind of meter themselves against, a time that they know when it starts, when it ends, because it's counted. I have seen a lot of providers, nurses, hospitals kind of dial back from counted pushing, which I love, and they allow people to push as they want. They might encourage and, cheerlead, if you will. Sometimes there's some pretty impressive cheerleading that goes on during this second stage of labor. But if you're unmedicated, the body will push pretty perfectly. It does. It's like it throws up well and sneezes well and poops well. It's a very natural instinct to push with these contractions. So it's not something you could ignore. It's not something you could not do. It just happens. So a lot of times, if I hear, this is one of my pet peeves in my work, when someone in the hospital says, or I've seen it happen at home too, don't push. The doctor's not here yet, don't push. Your body can't not push if that's where it's at, right? It's just if you're throwing up and they say don't throw up or don't sneeze, it's just something that is going to happen. It's reflexive, actually. It's very reflexive. So pushing is pretty natural, powerful, effective for those who are unmedicated. Now, for those who have epidurals, they don't sense that urge to push. They're not going to feel that powerful, whoa, I got to push. Sometimes that's accompanied with rectal pressure or the sensation. A lot of people are I think I have to have a bowel movement, or I'm feeling some poop, and it's that baby's head coming right past the rectum, which feels the same. It's the same pathway as a bowel movement, so it feels very similar. So when we hear people with that sensation, we're okay, that's another sign this baby's very close. So folks with an epidural kind of lose that sensation. However, their body's still lowering the baby, bringing the baby down through the pelvic cavity into the vaginal canal, while they may or may not be actively pushing. Now, some epidurals are provide more sensation than others, and you may still feel an urge to push. But a lot of people with an epidural, it takes several pushes for them to get efficient at it. So they don't get that biofeedback of what their body is trying to do. So they will okay, I'm going to push, and you'll be coached to do so in most cases. A lot of them say it's like having a poop, just like a big bowel movement. Do that kind of motion. It is very, very similar to that for sure. And so it might get more effective or more efficient at it as you do it a few times if you're not getting that biofeedback. So pushing brings the baby into the birth canal and down through the birth canal, which is the vaginal canal. And babies are still doing some rotating and adjusting there. So pushing in various positions can be very helpful, especially if it's a first baby. Second babies, third babies, sometimes we don't have time really to get into other positions, but sometimes we need to, based on what's going on, and that's where your team will kind of help guide you and support you through whatever is going on. Everybody has a little bit different scenario, of course. So stage 2 is pushing. Today it was 5 pushes, so that was probably less than 10 minutes this morning that we had stage 2. Some lucky first-time moms might push for only 20 minutes. I've seen moms push for 6-7 hours. This year, had a mom push for 9 hours and still have a vaginal delivery. That's pretty remarkable, pretty unusual. She was even unmedicated, which is pretty amazing. But given that everything is okay, they get to that 3-hour quote-unquote normal mark, and if everything's okay with mom and baby, then you can continue on and reassess. We're always reevaluating to see how things are going, of course. So that it talks about our stage 2. Second stage is simply the pushing out of the baby. I will say it does not feel the same for those who are unmedicated. It does not feel the same as transition. It's not as intense. and it kind of dials back into a different sensation. It's a lot of work. Like I tell people all the time, it is work. It's a lot of work to push a first baby out, and they do it and they're like, wow, I didn't realize how hard that would be. That's one of the hardest things I've ever done. Other people say, hey, that wasn't too bad. It's a different experience for everyone, based on a lot of different factors. We can't compare any one birth to another, even person to person. So it's a relief. It's a welcome change in sensation. Should be able to do that. And then, of course, as that baby's crowning, we get some pretty wild sensations there too. And normal. They're very normal. That's the tissue stretching. If you've heard the term ring of fire, that's something to be worked gently with. Your provider, the part of their job is to protect the perineum at that point. So they may have you slow the pushing. Sometimes the body is just has a really strong reaction to pushing. Other times you're able to just dial back and just kind of breathe that baby over the perineum to let the head emerge in a nice, gentle way. And we also have episodes with pelvic floor PTs, which talk about a little bit more about pushing in different positions, and which is super helpful to know about as well as you're in this stage and what your options are. So that concludes this little episode of stage 2, which is pushing. Curious how long you spent pushing. Maybe you were a 2-minute pusher, maybe you were a 2-hour pusher. All of those things are very normal. And so hopefully you go into this knowing. And I will say, when someone pushes for 3 or 4 hours, I've seen it so many times, it doesn't feel like that long. The time goes by strangely quickly. And you do get little breaks. Of course, it's not 3-4 hours of totally intense, nonstop work. These contractions have breaks between them. A lot of times, especially if people are tired from a longer labor, they're taking cat naps during that downtime between. They might be taking naps. We have cold water nearby. People warm up during this phase, so we'll have cold washcloths. Chapstick is common. Sometimes people want a little bit of gum for a few minutes. But it's an exciting time because we're so close. Like that baby's very close. Most of all the work is behind you. So second stage is exciting. You're at the finish line when we reach that second stage or that pushing part. I wish you the very, very best in pushing. Hopefully you are on the shorter side, but it's super normal to be on the longer side as well. Hopefully people realize that and are prepared for it. Prepared to do the moves, make the changes, do the work of pushing. It's pretty great at the end of labor. Thanks for being with us here for this episode of the Ordinary Doula Podcast. My name is Angie Rozier. I am your host. We are sponsored by Birth Learning, and hopefully you go out today and do or see or say something that makes you very happy. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Ordinary Doula Podcast with Angie Rozier, hosted by Birth Learning. Episode credits will be in the show notes. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many aspects of giving birth.